The Number One Cutie by Dog Loser. Chapter 1, in which Bakugou has to be number one at everything, because duh, he's Bakugou fucking Katsuki. It started out as a normal sunny day at UA High. No, fuck that. No day at UA was ever normal, and today was no exception from that. Bakugou was surrounded by the weirdest, loudest, dare I say craziest teenagers he's ever known. And he knew himself. And Deku, so that was saying something. Admittedly, it was sunny. Of course, Bakugou was up before the sun. He always went to bed early and got up early, because that was what healthy people do. Screw that shit his friends always pulled, staying up at some ungodly hour of the morning and dragging their ass out of bed at noon unless they were forced otherwise. Not to mention how much sugary sweet crap they always gorge themselves on. Horn's sweet tooth alone sent shivers up his spine. If they wanted to do that to themselves and their bodies, that was on them. He, on the other hand, was going to stay healthy and fit, because that was what's going to help him become the number one hero. And maybe it was a fairly normal day at UA, for whatever constituted as normal around here. There were no villain attacks, for one, so that was a plus. And Bakugou got to introduce Pikachu's face to the dirt earlier in Heroics training, which was another plus. But no, 2 pluses did not make a good day, because immediately after class, the Baku squad dragged his ass to an outing. It was shopping and dumplings. It was repulsive, even if he did enjoy the dumplings. He also got to trash talk Shitty Hair's god-awful style, although maybe it was a good thing he went, because he steered Kirishima away from the fucking Crocs section before the redhead could so much as get a word out. All in all, the outing was a success, because Bakugou would never allow for anything less. A repulsive success was still a success. At the dorms, he was able to retreat to his room for a blessed reprieve from the sheer dumbassery he'd been surrounded by, if only for a little while. Like clockworks, Horns and Pikachu were knocking at his door, whining for help with homework. When he opened the door to tell them to fuck off and stop mooching their grades off him, they rushed inside and plopped on his bed, thanking him profusely, even as he cursed them and his bane of an existence. They studied and worked till dinner. Content with how they'd been mostly applying themselves instead of goofing off, Bakugou let them off the hook after dinner instead of forcing them into more study. With squeals like those of dying rats, Horns darted into the common room, screaming something or other about a game night. Oh no, absolutely not. He'd already hit his social quota for the month. There was no way in hell that he was going to let her rope into another stupid fucking game night with the rest of these idiots that he called classmates. Never. Not over his dead body. Hell could freeze over before he'd join willingly. As it turns out, hell was quite cool this time of year. So, yes, fine, he joined the dumb game night, but only because Shitty Hair doubted his manliness. Why? He asked himself as he sat down to join whatever it was they're doing. Why does manliness matter so much? Not to mention, he was going to be number one. So clearly, he had to obliterate them in the game that they were going to play. Fuck yeah, Bakugou howled. Take that, shitty Deku. Ka-chan, why? Midoriya genuinely looked like he was going to cry. He drew 4. Yaoyorozu hummed, eyeing the 3 cards she had left, before calmly placing down a red 7. Ashido tossed down a red 4, and Kaminari put down a green 4. On it went, through Uraraka, Sero, Todoroki, Jiro, Ida, until it was Kirishima's turn, who went before Bakugou. Shitty Hair nervously eyed the 4 cards in his hand, and then glanced at the 2 that Bakugou had. Bro, he said, catching Bakugou's eye. You know I respect you. As a man. Bakugou raised an eyebrow. Shitty Hair continued, his fingers gripping the top of one of his cards. But, as a man, I can't let you win without a fight. He swallowed, licked his lips, and then set down his card. I'm sorry, bro. It was a +4. When Bakugou was kidnapped by the League of Villains, no one had doubted that he would be just fine, that his resolve to become a hero would remain unbroken. The Beast of BNHA was probably the most goddamn stubborn creature to ever roam the earth, and once he set his mind to something, he would not rest until he reached his goal. Thankfully, Bakugou's goal was to be the best hero ever known. But, looking at the wicked gaze that Bakugou now donned, and the wild look in his red eyes, his class shuddered to think what a formidable villain he could have made. Without so much as flinching, Bakugou set down a card. It was a +4. Uno. The entire table shrieked. Ashido and Kaminari howled with laughter, doubling over and gripping onto each other for dear life. Kirishima's jaw was on the fucking floor. Jiro wheezed, slapping Todoroki's back, causing the guy to actually jump and set his cards on fire. Sero slammed his head against the table, pounding it with his fist as he laughed to the point of tears. Uraraka and Yaoyorozu tried, and failed, to stifle their laughter behind their hands, while Ida screamed for everyone to quiet down. Midoriya actually started crying then. He drew 8. Technically, they never finished their game, mostly because Todoroki's cards went up in flames, and also because they couldn't seem to get a hold of themselves after that. Bakugou, with only one card left, was dubbed the victor. A success. Another repulsive success, yes, but a success nonetheless. Everyone went their own way after that. Where, Bakugou wasn't quite sure, because he was headed to bed. All he knew was that, on his way up the stairs, he could hear Pikachu and Earlobes, arguing over whether to watch a movie or play video games. At last, he had time to himself. Alone for the night, Bakugou readied for bed, and let himself unwind. He was asleep before 10:30. And then he was awake, 2 hours later, feeling like he could drink a fucking lake. Bakugou reached for his water bottle and found it heartbreakingly empty. For a long few minutes, he laid in bed and stared at the ceiling, wondering if dying from dehydration was preferable to getting up. His parched tongue answered that for him, pretty adamantly. Begrudgingly, he rolled out of bed, feet landing on the wooden floor with a quiet thump. Half the hallway's lights were off since it was past midnight. Luckily, there was no one out, but Bakugou knew all too well the dangers that lurked outside his cozy room. It was nearly 12:30 a.m., meaning that there was a good chance some of his classmates were still awake. Even when he was well rested and fully awake, he hardly had the mental capacity to tolerate them. Half asleep and feeling like he swallowed a mouthful of sand, he absolutely could not. The logical solution was to avoid social interaction at all costs, and also to curse the architects of the dormitories for not putting water fountains in the halls. Stealthily, Bakugou crept towards the stairs. The hallways and staircase were blissfully empty, but he wasn't dumb enough to think that he would be that lucky once he reached the main floor. Hearing voices as soon as his feet touched the carpet of the common room, Bakugou really did curse and he was right. It was the girls, from what he could tell from the voices. Most of the lights were on, so with just a glance towards the couch, he confirmed what he suspected. Jiro, Uraraka, Ashido, and Hagakure were all there, chit-chatting about something idiotic, most likely. They hadn't seen him yet, and considering that he would rather blow up the entire dormitory than have a conversation with them at this hour, he was going to do his damnedest to avoid them entirely. He sneaked into the kitchen, letting out the softest sigh of relief. Water. That was all he wanted. Not social interaction, not late-night chats with the girls, nada. Nothing. Zip, zilch. Quietly, he turned on the tap, filling up his water bottle. Standing there in the kitchen, he gulped down half of the bottle, and then had to fill it up again. Unfortunately, with an open floor pan from here to the common room, it was all too easy to hear what the girls were talking about. I would say Ojiro, honestly. Hagakure's voice drifted in from the kitchen. He's pretty decent, Jiro replied, but I wouldn't put him in the top 3. Well, then, who would you say, Jiro? Uraraka asked. Earlobes hummed, perhaps thoughtfully. Kirishima, she said decisively. Ashido started choking. Kirishima? Well, you have no room to judge if he's cute or not. He's in your friend group. You're biased. No, wait. I'm not saying he's not attractive, but I just wasn't expecting that to come from you. Bakugou was definitely not curious, but they were apparently ranking the guys in the classroom. He'd yet to hear his name, and he couldn't tell if that was a good or bad thing. On one hand, he did not want the girls to be up at this godforsaken hour talking about him. At the same time, if the guys in the class were being ranked, he had to come first. Because, duh, he was Bakugou fucking Katsuki. Filling up his water bottle again, Bakugou decided it was too late in the night to care and started for the stairs. "Well," Ashido was saying, "we all know who Uraraka would put." The blush was actually audible. What's that supposed to mean? You would totally rank Midoriya as top-class cutie. Bakugou was actually going to throw up. They were ranking how cute the guys in the class were? Of course they'd be wasting their time with something as childish as that. What did looks matter? They were here to become heroes, not fucking models. Uraraka was gasping for a reply. That's like if you said Bakugou was the cutest guy in class. At the mention of his name, Bakugou stopped, halfway up the stairs. No! Ashido wailed. Hagakure spoke up softly. "It's not like he isn't attractive," she said, "but he's just always angry." Bakugou glanced at the couch. The other girls were nodding in agreement. "I don't think I've ever seen him without a scowl," Jiro said. "Or a glare. It's hard to tell how cute he is when he never smiles." Ashido threw a pillow at the floor. "I've seen Blasty smile." Uraraka snorted. "Only when he's winning. It's still a smile." "It's creepy. It's a creepy smile." "Maybe," Hagakure murmured. "If he was softer. I think he could be really cute." Jiro laughed. "And we all know that's not going to happen, so there's no point in even debating it. Listen, I say Kirishima has to be in the top 3. And Todoroki. Midoriya, too." Bakugou didn't hear the rest. His teeth clenched, his grip tightening on his water bottle. Did he care what they thought about him? No, absolutely fucking not. Did he care that they ranked shitty hair, half and half, and fucking Deku above him? Abso-fucking-lutely. Bakugou turned back down towards the stairs. He was actually standing right behind the couch before anyone even noticed him. Ashido glanced his way absent-mindedly, did a double-take, and shrieked. The other girls, startled, screamed out of reflex. All 4 of them stared at Bakugou with wide, deer-in-the-headlight eyes. They genuinely looked like they were going to faint, or shit themselves, or flee. Well, as far as he was concerned, that's what they got for talking about him behind his back. He pointed an accusatory finger at them, his infamous scowl on his lips. "Listen up, fuck-munchers," Bakugou said, far too calmly to do anything but send shivers of terror up their spines. "I could give 2 shits and a rat's ass about who you think is cute or not. I think it's the stupidest thing you could be wasting your time on." The girls exchanged glances, nervous. Bakugou always responded to anyone saying anything about him with a furious roar, and a shit ton of explosions. But here he was, catching them red-handed and blatantly saying he wasn't cute as everyone else, and he was talking calmly? It was more terrifying than playing Uno with him. Bakugou continued. A twisted grin replaced his scowl. "But that's a fucking challenge if I've ever heard one. And you know what I have to say to that?" He leaned forward, making sure he had their whole attention. The girls leaned backwards, instinctively. Every terrified eye was on him. None of them even dared to breathe, too afraid of his wrath if they made another misstep. Of course, what Bakugou had to say was almost worse than what they were expecting. "Challenge fucking accepted." Chapter 2, in which becoming the #1 hero is not top priority, for now, and becoming the #1 cutie is. The girls didn't know what to expect, and frankly, they were curious. Terrified, yes, because this is Bakugou fucking Katsuki, but at the same time, they knew Bakugou's mother was a model, and his parents ran a successful fashion company. Not to mention that the kid was one of the smartest in the class, and he was practically a genius when it came to battle strategies. And like Hagakure had said, Bakugou wasn't bad-looking. It was more of a personality issue. So who knew what Bakugou might come up with? Hardly any of them had an easy time getting to sleep that night, tossing and turning, and wondering what in the world they could expect at school tomorrow. Only time would tell, but that didn't stop them from having their own expectations. Would he have makeup on? Style his hair a different way? What in the world could he do to prove them wrong? Despite not knowing what to expect, all 4 were still stunned when they walked into class. There was Bakugou Katsuki, sitting at his desk like usual. His feet, rather than being kicked up like they usually were on the floor for once. He was reclined into his seat, looking relaxed instead of uptight with anger. But besides that, he looked the exact same. Confused, the girls sat in their seats and exchanged glances. They gave Bakugou a double take, just to make sure, and yes, not a hair was out of place from his normal day-to-day look. What gives? Jiro murmured. Had he given up on the challenge? It had been late when they saw him, and they all knew Bakugou was practically never awake past 10 o'clock. Maybe he'd accepted their challenge in a sleepy haze, and forgot about it when he woke up this morning? But he seemed plenty awake when he practically threatened them that he would get number 1 on their Class 1A cute guy list. By then, Yozuru and Asui were in on what happened last night. Each girl was keeping a careful eye on him, but they agreed. Nothing was out of the ordinary. Maybe Bakugou was just that arrogant. Their classmate was proud, yes, but to think so highly of himself that he changed nothing? Or maybe he was that self-confident? No one could figure it out. Ashido and Uraraka were half expecting Bakugou to be playing a prank. Midoriya walked into the class with Todoroki. The two parted ways, the former taking his seat behind Bakugou as usual. Good morning, Ka-chan. The girls sighed, bored with their watching already. This was routine by now, a memorized song and dance from the beginning of the school year. And then there was no yelling. And no explosion. Not even the littlest pops from Bakugou's palms to signal his typical irritation at Midoriya's nickname for him. All the girls' heads immediately swiveled, their gazes focusing on the interaction of Bakugou and Midoriya. Bakugou turned his head over his shoulder to look at Midoriya, who stared ahead, clearly confused. One of Bakugou's hands lifted in a lazy wave. Morning, Midoriya. It almost sounded pleasant. And then Bakugou returned to how he'd been sitting, facing forward, as if he hadn't just given half the class the verbal equivalent of Kaminari's 1.3 million volt attack. Every single girl in the classroom had her jaw on the floor, and Midoriya looked like he'd just seen a ghost. Ka-chan? Once more, Bakugou turned his head over his shoulder. He didn't have a single trace of irritation on his face, not even the barest hint of annoyance. Yeah? Midoriya looked like he was about to walk into a trap. Are you feeling alright? Yeah, just fine. Midoriya didn't look confident in the slightest, but he didn't say anything more, and so Bakugou turned back around. As soon as the red eyes of the explosive quirk user were off him, Midoriya visibly shuddered, slinking into his seat. The girls finally tore their eyes away, looking at each other with jaws agape. Before they could even get a word out, Ida was screaming, "Class is beginning! Everyone in your seats!" On cue, Aizawa walked in, looking as tired as usual. His eyes briefly lingered on Bakugou, but the gaze was almost imperceptible, lasting only a second. All right, class, time to start. And so class started. No one noticed Bakugou's smirk. Bakugou couldn't be more fucking proud of himself for coming up with this shit. This, as Pikachu would say, was some god-tier level fuckery. But hey, the girls wanted him to be different, didn't they? He'd heard their entire conversation, and he knew his looks weren't the problem. So he would change his personality, and they would eat shit for it. It was fucking difficult to rein in his usual temperament, but my god, the look on Deku's face was absolutely worth it, and it was barely 8 in the morning. Unfortunately, Bakugou couldn't quite show off his new style during the class. The closest he got to it was by not blowing anyone up, or yelling at anyone, but he didn't do much when the teachers were lecturing to begin with. A good portion of the class had noticed, as far as he could tell, the girls for one. Deku was an obvious second. Class size was a little suspicious, only because he hadn't started the day with his feet on the desk, and Kirishima was eyeing him. Lunch was going to be fun, but nothing was going to be more interesting than heroics class this afternoon. Even still, lunch came first. The final bell rang, and everyone beelined for the door. The girls eyed Bakugou suspiciously on their way out, trying to act as if they weren't staring at him. In response, Bakugou locked eyes with Roundface. She froze. He smiled at her. Uraraka yelped softly, and her face turned beet red before she quickly turned away, exiting the room. The rest of the girls all took their leave with her, carefully avoiding eye contact. Content with his work, Bakugou slid out of his seat and grabbed his bag. "Bakugou?" Bakugou looked up to see Kaminari, standing beside his desk. He refrained from biting out a "What do you want, dunce face?" and instead kept himself to a neutral "Yeah." His reaction seemed to offset Pikachu even more. Shitty Hair, Raccoon Eyes, and the walking tape expenser all conjoined with the two of them, waiting to go to lunch, but also giving Bakugou a weird look. Kaminari looked uneasily at his friends before returning his gaze to Bakugou. But before he could even get the words out, Kirishima spoke up. "You good, man?" Shitty Hair asked. "You're acting weird." With all their attention on him, Bakugou gave them the same reaction he gave the girls, and smiled at them. Their reactions were very different, and it was fucking hilarious. Every single one of them seemed to lag. Bakugou could practically see the loading symbol over each one of their heads. "Bakugou?" Kaminari stammered weakly. Bakugou slid his bag over his shoulder. "You're worrying too much, Kaminari," he responded easily. "I'll tell you guys at lunch since you're my friends, but you gotta keep your mouth shut to the rest of the class. It's not as fun if they're in on the loop." And with that, he left the classroom, and the Baku squad followed warily behind. Aizawa, supposedly asleep on the floor, cracked an eye open. God, his class just never got off their bullshit, did they? Shitty Hair was about to fucking die. "Oh my god," Bakugou sighed, pounding at the redhead's back. The teen choked and spluttered, his face red as a beet, and what little air he wheezed in was immediately replaced with howling laughter. Maybe Bakugou shouldn't have told him he was being nice for the day when Shitty was taking a drink, but oh well. "Oh my god," Shitty Hair gasped, wiping at his eyes. You're nice?" "Shut the fuck up," Bakugou grouched. "You're gonna spoil the fucking fun." Getting Kirishima to quiet down didn't matter so much, considering that Tapeface and Sparky were literally on the floor. Meanwhile, Horns had her face buried in her hands. "I hold," she whispered, "too much power. I did this. I broke Bakugou. I broke Blasty." "You didn't fucking break shit." "Baku, bro," Kaminari choked out. "You called Midoriya like Midoriya. She broke you." Shitty Hair roared with new laughter. Sarah, crawling up onto his chair like a demon, had tears running down his cheeks. "Did you see his face? Midoriya looked like he was about to shit himself." Tapeface was luckily across the table, or Bakugou might have punched him for talking so damn loud. Luckily, this idiotic group was usually loud, so no one was paying them any extra attention. "It's gonna get better," Bakugou taunted. Every single eye was on him. He grinned. Kirishima recovered enough to take another sip of water. "Heroics," he said simply. The redhead beside him launched into another coughing fit. Ashido screamed, and what little progress Sora and Kaminari had made in getting up off the floor reset. Bakugou merely watched the chaos he created, with a smirk befitting the devil himself. Bakugou's nice face was back on. Kirishima had told him, more than once, how weird it looked now more than ever with his hero suit on. Bakugou had responded, in that sickly sweet voice, that he would crush Shitty Hair's face into the dirt if he blew this. The training for today couldn't have been more perfect either. Heroes and villains. "All Might," Bakugou interjected. "I'd like to be the villain. Please." And it had fucking worked. They set up a cross-ground beta, Bakugou vs Class 1A. No one knew where anyone else was. The hero team were given communication devices, and Bakugou was told to try not to give anyone serious injuries, please. Bakugou had promised that he'd try his best. Aizawa, the poor hero looked like the life had been drained out of his eyes, just sighed. And so it began. His first victim was Jiro. He not so much found her as she found him. Koda and Shoji weren't far behind, as the ones with the best hearing in the entire class. Bakugou was just waiting, standing in the dead center of the street. Waiting. She turned the corner and locked eyes with him. He gave her a polite smile, before sparks popped off his gloved fingers. "Jiro," he said kindly. And she froze. "I'm gonna crush you." Koda, hiding nearby, started crying. Shoji awkwardly tried to comfort him. Explosions rocked the entire fucking training base. Collectively, Jiro, Koda, and Shoji all screamed. Far above, in the safety booth overlooking the whole dumpster fire fiasco, Aizawa pinched the bridge of his nose. God fucking help him survive this class. The next to arrive on the scene was Suyu and the fucking grape. The frog was tricky, with the way she could just stick to walls, but Bakugou quickly found that giving her no walls to stick to worked out quite nicely. Once she was out of commission, the explosive blonde turned and stared Mineta dead in the eye. And he did the nice thing. He smiled. The grape trembled and went limp, passed out from fear or sheer terror. Grinning like a madman, Bakugou stepped over his KO'd comrades. 5 down, 14 to go. He encountered Toru, Yaoyorozu, and Todoroki next. Toru squealed, hiding behind Yaoyorozu, although he only knew that much because Yaoyorozu put an arm behind her protectively. Ponytail put on a brave face, Bakugou could give her that, but she looked as if she was facing an entirely new person. The half-and-half bastard, as usual, looked completely unfazed. Well, Bakugou would fix that. He tore through each and every one of them in a way that was so unlike him that even Aizawa shivered. Rather than expressing his rage vocally, the kid was pouring every single ounce of focus and energy into his attacks. He was violent and brutal, and smiling the entire time. Even Todoroki didn't stand a chance, let alone the rest of them. 18 fell to his calm, steady hands. Some put up a better fight than others, but ultimately Bakugou was victorious. Calm, cool, and collected, he posed more of a threat than he ever had when he was boiling over with explosive energy. Just thinking of all the potential he had if he was like this all the time had Aizawa's head aching. There was only one student left. Aizawa was close to calling the whole thing off at this point, but that cold wrath would be turned on him if he so much as voiced the idea. He reached for a bottle of Tylenol instead. On the battlefield, Bakugou approached Midoriya. "Kachan," Midoriya started. The braveness that the boy had cultivated had been snapped out of him, seeing Bakugou take out every single one of his classmates. Aizawa and Bakugou both watched as Midoriya sped ran through the 5 stages of grief, ultimately arriving at acceptance. You really saved me for last on purpose, huh?" Bakugou cracked his knuckles and neck. "I sure did," he said, smiling. Midoriya. Midoriya, at least, put up a good fight. Afterwards, Recovery Girl milled around the aftermath of the hurricane that was Bakugou Katsuki. Aizawa approached the kid, who still had that eerie smile on his face. Even All Might seemed nervous in the boy's presence. "Good job, young Bakugou," All Might laughed tensely. "Thank you," Bakugou said pleasantly. All Might immediately excused himself to help out the other students. Aizawa took a deep breath. It came out as a very, very tired sigh. "Kid," he started. "What gives?" Bakugou shrugged and crossed his arms. His red eyes proudly surveyed the chaos he created. "I overheard the girls talking last night," he explained. At least around Aizawa he dropped the persona. It was more than a little relieving. They said Icy Hot and Deku were cuter than me because I was too angry. I told them I'd show them wrong, and I did. Aizawa pinched the bridge of his nose. He shouldn't have asked. "Don't do it again." Bakugou smirked. "I can't back down from a challenge, Sensei," he said, like it was that simple, and like he wasn't the cause of an entire training ground's destruction. Aizawa felt another headache coming on. He needed a raise. For all it was worth, later, the girls told Bakugou that he was very cute when he smiled. The boys begged him to never, ever smile again.